Hello, friends. My name is Kenny Connolly. I'm a next generation pastor, and I am on a journey to recruit 50 volunteers over the course of the next 90 days. And today is day 23. And today I want to introduce something I've kind of hinted towards in the last couple of weeks. You've heard me maybe mention my pipeline. I've talked about volunteers that I have on a list, and I want to kind of invite you into what that actually looks like. I think one of the main reasons why we sometimes don't get the volunteers that we recruit and they don't actually make it volunteers is because they fall through the cracks. We lose them. They get disconnected. They sign up for an orientation and they don't make it. And for whatever reason, we forget to invite them to the next one. And then weeks go by and we lose them. And so I think the essential piece to a solid volunteer recruiting strategy is your pipeline. And I'm going to introduce my pipeline, but I'm going to tell you about it today, and also the evolution of this pipeline, and even through this challenge of how my pipeline is continuing to evolve into something new. But we're going to start by saying my pipeline for over 10 years has been simply a Google spreadsheet. It's literally a spreadsheet. And I have used this at small churches, big churches, multi-site churches, where there were 4 or 5 people working off this spreadsheet. And when I had 15 to 17 people working off this spreadsheet. Essentially, I'm a believer that everybody who's in the volunteer recruiting process needs to be working off the same page. We all need to be working on the same page. And every single person that's in our process, at any stage of our process, they also need to be on the same page. So that way there's transparency, that way there's not duplication, but everything is there. So anytime somebody expresses an interest in volunteering, or even I get an idea in my head of I should ask that person, or somebody recommends, hey, you should call my sister. Anytime a name comes up, it immediately goes to my pipeline. If somebody signs up for a volunteer orientation, pipeline. They all go to the pipeline, and it's a pretty simple spreadsheet where it is a document where we have their name, phone number, email address, their age. Now their age being whether they're an adult, teenager, high schooler, whatever. And then I also, if you have multiple staff, I assign it to a staff. So I know who the people that I'm responsible for on my pipeline. And essentially the pipeline is just a series of check boxes of all the things that need to be done, including some dates. So I like to have a date when they come on the pipeline. So I can always keep track of how long they've been in the process. One of the first things I invite somebody to is a volunteer orientation. So when they register for volunteer orientation, there's a checkbox, and I like to write a date of what orientation they're planning on coming to. Now, if they don't show up for my orientation, then I have either, and this has varied over the years, I have a checkbox for missed orientation, or I can then just uncheck the box of orientation. I keep the date, the old date, but I just keep it unchecked so I can invite that back. But I think currently the way I have it is I actually have a box for missed orientation because I want to be able to sort the list and contact people who have already signed up but missed, because I want to send very specific communication to them. And then after that, I've got check boxes for they filled out the volunteer application, they filled out the intake form, they agreed to my ministry agreement that is part of the application. Because I do have things, if somebody disagrees with that, then we have to have a conversation. I have check boxes for when they observed, check boxes for their references, for each one of their references. I have a checkbox for that they've been trained, that they have received the volunteer handbook, that they've been background checked. I don't know if I said that. And then even that they've been officially added to a roster, printed a lanyard, given a t-shirt, and until they're done. And then I think of the last checkbox is like they've been placed. And then I even have a checkbox if they It's a silly term. I say failure to launch. Like at some point they backed out. They stopped responding. And so I can check that as well. That's essentially it. And I want to walk everybody through. Some people are very early in the stage, and I'm just inviting to the volunteer orientation. And it's really just a list where I can continue to invite people to the volunteer orientation. But then other people come to the orientation, and this is my checkbox to move them towards becoming a volunteer. So it's very essential. And then for those who fail to launch, then I can actually move them to another tab so they don't stay on there, but I have a record of where we got in the process. So if they ever apply again, I have that. So this is what my volunteer pipeline looks like. Tomorrow, I'm gonna take you on a tour of it and let you see what it looks like. But here's the evolution. I've always been partial to a good spreadsheet. I love a good spreadsheet. But at my church now, I'm using Planning Center Online. Planning Center Online has a very impressive workflow process, and I just haven't built it out yet. But during this 90-day challenge, I'm going to build out the workflow or the multiple workflows, so that way everything lives in a workflow, not on a spreadsheet, but in our database, which is probably better. If you use Planning Center, you can build out a workflow. I'll show you how I do mine. If you use Church Community Builder, they have process queues, which you can use those. Even when I was at Mariners, we built out a very beautiful process, volunteer onboarding process that was customized for Rock and for us. And it was awesome as well. So the bottom line is, if you have a fancy database that allows you to build workflows and process queues, do it. But even if you don't have that, or you don't know how to do that, a spreadsheet will work. I recruited over 400 volunteers in 18 months using just a spreadsheet. A whole team of us working together and working through the workflow. So tune in tomorrow, and I'm gonna take you on a tour of my spreadsheet, let you see what it looks like, how I use it, and I'll give you additional peeks as I continue to add people to my list, and you can see how I'm working these people from prospects to permanent volunteers. What about you? What process do you use? Do you have, what does your list look like? How do you process people from A to Z as you move them towards becoming volunteers?